And I'm even drinking some of the local iced coffee, some Norco.
Not sponsoring us.
We are now. Norco. Oh, tastes like Newcastle.
Artofsleepingin with Misty. Hey guys, thanks so much for tuning in. I have Adam Hills here tonight, who has been kind enough to let me interview him, which is amazing. Hi Adam.
Hi. I've been roped into this. I had no idea what I was in for. I just turned up to do my show. I've been locked in a room. No, I can't even rehearse until I do an interview.
It's true. Is this strange that somebody's interviewing you and you're not the interviewee?
No, it's okay.
Yeah.
I interviewed Michael Parkinson last year or the year before.
Okay.
And I started by telling the truth, which was I couldn't sleep during the night, and it was because I was nervous about interviewing. And he said the best thing. He said, you should never be nervous about interviewing someone who does interviews for a living. He said, because we know what you want.
Right.
We want to give you a good interview.
Okay.
And so we're going to make sure you get one.
Yeah.
He said it's the people who don't want to be there or don't like doing interviews. They're the ones that you should be nervous of.
Okay, well, I'll get on to what was going to be my first question is, Emily wanted to know a bit more about Naked Tuesday. So Craig Coons was originally from Newcastle.
He was.
And this is why you've come here.
Actually, yeah. He came to one of my shows in Melbourne a few years ago, and he's got thyroid cancer, and he was given 13 months to live. And one of his bucket list wishes was to meet me, and he came backstage and we had a chat, and I said, whatever I can do to help, I will. And then a wee while later, he was in the audience of my talk show. And it turns out he had invented this thing called Naked Tuesday, which was a way of laughing in the face of cancer. So he would get nude, take photos of himself in like the Abbey Road crossing pose or something like that, and put it up on the internet. And I just thought it was the most childish way of dealing with something so serious. So I went out with him and had a whole bunch of photos taken.
Yeah.
And I always wanted to do something more with him as part of the show. I wanted to get him back every week. I wanted this to become a big movement. And the thing is, even though you're making your own show, you don't always have final say.
Yeah.
So I decided, right, well, stand up, I can do whatever the hell I want. So I said to him, well, let's come up with a show. I wanted to come up with a show about that idea of laughing in the face of death anyway.
Yep.
And then I said to him, well, do you want to come and be in this show?
Yeah.
Let's come and I wasn't sure how well he was going to be or how well it was going to work. And we premiered it at the Melbourne Comedy Festival, so we didn't even have like a quiet little place. We just went, ta-da, here's 900 people, give it a crack.
Yeah.
And he's great. He's just become the heart of the show. And when I did the Edinburgh Fringe Festival last year, he was too sick to travel. Mm-hmm. So I would FaceTime him every night. And I think it was 5:30 in the morning in Melbourne. And he'd get up every morning and we'd FaceTime and he'd tell jokes from the other side of the world and to 900 people in Edinburgh, and they loved it. So accidentally, because I do so much work on the last leg, I couldn't tour all in one hit, so I've had to space it out, which has meant I've kept saying to him, hey, I'm doing the Sydney Opera House in January, do you want to come to that? And then it was, I might do Newcastle the week after. But doing Newcastle was purely for him. I knew this was his hometown and I wanted him to come back and, have a special night.
I asked him if he had anything he wanted to add, and all he said was, in quote, every time he laughs at Jiggles, which is apparently what you said when he was behind you in one of the photographs.
Yeah. We did an Ann Geddes shot, and he was snuggled up behind me, and I said every time he laughed at Jiggles on my back.
You also always have someone signing in your shows.
Yes. Yeah.
Have you picked up any sign language yourself?
No, and that's the worst bit, because I do shows with a sign interpreter. Deaf people forget that I'm not the one signing. Right. So they'll come up to me on the street normally, and people will wave to me on the street and start signing, and I look at them going, I don't know what you're saying, and I can't tell you I don't know what you're saying. So eventually I just shrug for long enough that they kind of go, oh, he can't sign, that's why he has an interpreter. And then maybe they'll give me a thumbs up and I'll give them a thank you.
Thank you. But don't get that confused with under the chin, because that means F you.
Oh, wow. You'd think they would come up with a much easier way of delineating those two. Although that could explain why I've upset so many deaf people in public.
Tim Fitzhyam.
Yeah,
he sent in, did the 2 words good evening still reduce you to a wonderful wobbling pool of giggles? Apparently, yes.
Do you know what? As you said Tim Fitzheim, I was thinking, what was it that he said that cracked me up so much? And it was, and I don't even know what it was. I think it was, he made a joke and I made a joke back at him. And rather than laughing or agreeing with me, he just went, "Good evening." I thought it was, I'm going to have to go back and watch his interview now because he's just one of those people who is naturally funny at all times.
Yeah, he's really lovely. So on a Pics and Specs, did you ever think that it would take off like it did and that it's still going?
No, that surprises me. I think no, because it was such a gradual thing. Mm-hmm. Although in retrospect it feels like it was something that took off. It really, I remember I think the first week we had 660,000 viewers, and then the next week it dropped to 610,000 viewers. Like, I can actually remember that.
Yeah, wow.
And then it was the third week it picked up. So I think what happened was people tuned in to watch this new show, and those that didn't like it went, "Well, this is not some ABC documentary. Why am I watching this?" And then they turned off. And then the second week Ross Noble was on, so it was just bonkersness. It was like we never even got to the questions. It was Ross going off on his little tangents, crazy, and telling stories. And then I think, so the people that watched it and didn't like it dropped off, but people who would never have thought this would be their type of show gradually caught on. So I remember in the first series having a bet as to whether we could crack the 1 million mark, and we never did.
Yeah.
But by about 3 years in, we were regularly getting 1.2, 1.3 million people. So it was a slow build.
Anna wanted to know, what was your favourite moment of Pics and Specs?
Oh, wow. It's a dead heat between us doing the Rocky Horror ending.
I have that down here on my pad as my favourite.
Yeah, the Rocky Horror ending with Richard O'Brien singing the Time Warp. And I remember sitting around the table, we all kind of planned how it would play out, and then the idea that at the very end I wouldn't take part in it all, and then at the end I would stand up and rip off, and I'd be in full Rocky Horror gear. And I remember Richard O'Brien, when we explained what was going on, just looking at me going, "Is this just an excuse for you to wear women's clothing, Adam? Or is this integral to the show?" And I went, "Can it be both?" So I think that, and when Little Nell, I mean, that was, and this is a perfect example of an obstacle becoming, whenever someone in a show says, "Look, we're not going to be able to do this, we'll have to scrap the whole thing," I always go, no, because now we can, there's got to be a funny way of finding a solution. And in this instance, Little Nell was a performer in the 60s, I think, on American television, who did an act called The Swim, and her boob kept, but we couldn't get the permission to show the footage, or we couldn't afford it. It was going to be thousands of dollars. And so rather than go, "Well, let's scrap that bit," we went, "Well, let's recreate it. Why don't we get Frank Woodley to recreate it?" And I think my original thought was Frank would be in a mankini and he would just keep slipping out the side. And then I think Frank on the day turned up and went, unbeknownst to me, right. I have to point out, I didn't know what was happening. The only person he told was the producer and the director, and one cameraman, because he knew the cameraman would have to find them. He said, "I'm going to do it, but while I'm doing it, I'm going to pop a testicle out the side of my swimmers." So none of us knew this was going to happen. Hamish Blake had he was going to cover up anyway, with a piece of perspex, but he didn't know what was going to happen, I don't think. And I remember when it, because Miff lost it first. Yeah. Totally lost it. And then I realised, and then I honestly didn't realise it was on purpose. So I was looking at Frank going, Frank. And he just kept ignoring me. And I was thinking, why is he ignoring me? And afterwards I realised it's because he did the whole thing on purpose. But that for me was just the perfect moment of anarchy, comedic anarchy on a TV show.
That's brilliant. Your current show, The Last Leg, in England, that is called The Last Leg because you only have 1.5 legs. And Alex Brooke also only has one full leg. Yeah. So you started that as commentating the Paralympics. My friend Georgia, she was at the Paralympics. She won a bronze for javelin. Right. So we don't piss her off because she can do javelin. She wanted me to ask you, if you went into Paralympics, what sport would you choose?
Well, after after 2008, I was in Beijing in 2008 covering the Paralympics for the ABC, and I was approached by a few coaches because they'd like to talent spot, and I was asked if I would consider playing wheelchair tennis. Even though I didn't think I qualified, they said, well, we're not sure, your disability might qualify you for wheelchair, and it's a sport and it's a business. And they said, look, most of the wheelchair tennis people we have been in wheelchairs for ages, maybe haven't played tennis. You were a tennis coach, you know how to play tennis, all we need to do is get you to learn how to use a wheelchair. And I went, oh, okay, so what does that entail? And they went, well, you'd have to start, when you go back to Melbourne, you'd have to start using a chair pretty much 20 hours a week around the office all the time, and then we'd have to start training you. And I just thought, this is way too much work. I'd much rather just tell jokes if that's okay.
Yeah.
And I talked to one of the head of the Paralympics associations and said, look, I'm not sure that I've really got the time for this. And he said, honestly, the best thing you can do for the Paralympics right now is tell people about it.
Yeah.
And so then in 2012, Channel 4 asked us to make this show about the Paralympics. I didn't want it to be a foot-based pun for the title. I didn't want it. I thought that was a bit cheap and easy. And I mean, some of the titles we did, Alex and Josh and I were on stage once and we read out all the names they suggested, and it was just terrible. It's like, mobility scooters are for fat people. Imagine a TV show called that.
Gosh.
Dwarves Aren't Magic. Amputee and scones was another one. These are all the suggestions. So eventually someone came up with the last leg, and I said, look, I'm not really sure about this. I don't know that I want it to be a leg pun. Until I saw a script that said, g'day and welcome to the last leg of Channel 4's Paralympics coverage. And I went, okay, all right, I'm with it now. Because now there is a reason, there's a legitimate reason for it being there. It's the last leg of today's coverage. Mm-hmm. And the last leg of a race, so there's a sporting pun and it's a disability. It was like 3 puns in one, and I kind of went, yeah, all right, I'll let you get away with that.
My friend Adam, he had both his legs amputated when he was 2. He wanted to know if you have any advice for an amputee going into the entertainment industry, because he's looking to get into it.
Oh, wow. Nothing will stop you. Like, I remember being in LA years ago, having meetings with Hollywood casting agents and having these meetings and going blah, 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 and then tell us about yourself, and you go, oh, I do this and this and this. And then every now and then I'd think, I'd better tell them. And I'd go, by the way, I do have a prosthetic leg. Never once did they blink an eyelid. I would have thought they'd go, oh, I don't know, we can use you, or maybe just for a disabled role. Not one, like, people were just absolutely fine. And at one point one of them even said, oh, we just had a double amputee in here. I think it was Amy Mullins, I think was her name, who was a Paralympic star. Oh, she's amazing. So, I mean, entertainment is one of the probably few jobs that a disability doesn't hinder and often helps.
There you go. In the last leg, you take on some kind of big topics. Dave would like to know, would you ever cross the line from the change through comedy to the change through to politics?
No, I don't. It's really tempting. And I am friends with a lot of politicians, so I think there is a kind of a common ground there. The people I'm friends with anyway in politics are those that really want to make the world a better place, and I think comedians like that idea as well. But I don't think I would. That's a really good question, though. I mean, you want to make things better, but I think maybe in a smaller level, maybe I'd run for local MP or something like that. But I think when you get the higher up you get, the less you can actually achieve, and I think you're better off just going out and making jokes.
Keisha, who's behind the camera, she saw you in Breaker Moran.
Oh, wow.
In 2007 at the Fringe. She said it was the first time she cried in a show. Would you ever do more acting?
Wow, I might now. Well, it depends why she was crying. Oh my God.
Because
I can't believe I paid money to watch this. He's awful. Well, I wouldn't. It's a weird one. I had never really acted before, and I didn't think I was particularly. I never really got my head around that role. It was a weird thing to do. But eventually, I felt. Okay, this is entirely my experience of acting. We had these old army boots, and we had almost like a bandage that would wrap up until your knee, because that's what they wore in the Boer War. And this one particular day, my strapping came undone in the first 5 minutes, and so for the entire rest of the play, I was completely preoccupied with the fact that I had to keep strapping it up and then it would come undone, and I was getting angry at myself because it wasn't right and I should be better at this. Did not pay attention to what I was saying. And then at the end of the play, all the other cast went, "Wow, you were great today." And I went, "Okay, well, I clearly don't understand acting." I honestly don't know what acting is then, because I didn't pay any attention to what I did. We did, what was the thing we did? Greg Fleet wrote a sitcom called Die on Your Feet that was myself and Corinne Grant and Stephen Gates and Alan Bro and Fleety. And I loved doing it. I'm not sure if I'm any good at it, but if people want me to do it, I'm happy to.
There's a nod behind the camera. So. Also, I saw Jimmy Carr is performing here in a couple of nights. I was thinking you should maybe you could like play a prank on him or something, or see who in the audience is going to that show and have a cue that they all shout out a message to him or something.
I had that happen once in England with Dara O'Brien, who hosts Mock the Week, and the compere for this gig was a guy called Alistair Barry. And what had happened was we were doing, I don't even remember, Walsall and Telford, which are two towns near each other, and we were doing two different universities. And I think Dara went on first here and I went on first there, and then we both swapped.
Right.
And then I went on second there and Dara went on second there. And I think Alistair Barry might have done the same, like he was on before Dara, and there was another, there was a different MC at each place. It was this weird swap over thing. So I got to the second gig and I had a bit where I would go, "Okay, everyone repeat after me if you know," or do the next line, and I would do "Take on Me" and go, "Oh, oh, oh." And what had happened was that afternoon we'd all gone to see the movie AI, Artificial Intelligence, with this kid walking around, this little robot going, "I love you, Mummy." So when I went, "Oh, oh, oh," the entire crowd went, "I love you, Mummy." It was like 400 people, and I went, "What was that?" And they just pissed themselves. And I went, "Sorry, go back. What did you just say?" And one of them said, "I love you, Mummy." And I went, "Why would you even do that?" And then they went, because Alistair, who was on earlier, told us to do it as a joke. Yeah. So I haven't thought what I would do for Jimmy Carr.
Well, thank you so much for taking the time to sit down. Thank you to Matt and Keisha, who are behind the cameras, and Billy, who lent me his microphones. Good on you, Billy. Guys, make sure you like this video up, leave a comment if you like, share it around, and remember to hit that subscribe button if you haven't already. Thank you so much. Bye.
Bye.
Oh, very sorry, sir. That is my cat. It is choking on a fur ball.